You're listening to Invited In with Christine Boyle, where disability and faith meet. Here's your host, Christine Boyle. You are invited in.
Hey friend, welcome to another episode of Disability and Faith. I'm Christine Boyle, your host, and it is so good to be back with you. Hey, this episode's going to be a little bit different. I feel like I always preface my episodes by saying that for some reason, but truly this episode, I am using a recording from, about a week and a half ago when I had kind of this incident, for lack of better words, here in my home, an appointment in my home, and I posted it on YouTube, made some reels out of it, got a lot of traction from people, a lot of engagement from the disability parents. And so I wanted to make it into a podcast, but I did want to kind of give a little bit more of an introduction to what happened, how it happened, what I, want you guys to know about that experience, all of those things. So I'm going to be sharing that video for those of you who watch on YouTube, and I'm going to be sharing that audio in this podcast episode. But yeah, it was a little bit of a crazy experience, to say the least. I'll give you a as quick as I can, rundown of what happened, why it happened, and how I ended up there. So in July, the Ohio Department of Medicaid contracted with a new company to manage the Ohio Home Care Waiver, which is the waiver, the Medicaid waiver that Kevin is on, and it's the Medicaid waiver that Courtney had been on. And Courtney was on it from the time she was 3 years old, and she would be turning 25 at the beginning of December. So we're talking 22 years. This program has been a part of my life. And then Kevin got on it pretty shortly after he came home to the United States. And he has been here 13 years. So again, 2 kids, 22 years on this program. And it was really interesting because every month, the case managers for this program have to do a monthly check-in. It could be via email, it could be phone call. And I thought it was really weird knowing that Medicaid had hired a new company to contract with to manage this program. I thought it was weird that, months and months literally went by without me hearing from anybody. And, it started to get, I'll be honest, like a little annoying because truth be told, like my dad, for example, he's on a Medicaid waiver program. I know most of you know I am a caregiver for him. I'm his legal guardian. And if they reach out, the case manager, and say, hey, we're doing the monthly check-in, whether it's a phone call or email, and I don't respond, which I've been guilty of. There's plenty of days I feel like I'm just trying to keep my head above water, right? If you really don't respond, like I've gotten letters in the mail that are like, Richard's going to be disenrolled from his Medicaid waiver if you don't respond. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay. I got to respond to this. And so I really have zero tolerance for like double standards, right? So I know had people been doing their jobs appropriately, reaching out to me on a monthly basis, and had I not responded to them, Kevin would be at risk for being disenrolled, right? And so it kind of bugs me when the roles are reversed and somehow, some way, they're allowed to just not contact me for 3 months. And, given this is the case manager I would be contacting if we had an issue with our nursing, if we needed more nursing hours, if our lift on our van stopped working, for Kevin's wheelchair, if there was some sort of home modification we needed to do, there's emergent situations that can even arise. So again, I thought it was a little weird. We hadn't heard from anybody. And so that was the first thing that was a little annoying. Well, then I end up hearing from the case manager finally. In addition to introducing herself, she also tells me that Kevin's due for his annual assessment and that she needs to come out to meet him and do the annual assessment. And it has to be done in X amount of days. Short period of time, right? And so I tell her, okay, I'll look at my calendar. I'll get back to you. And so I look at my calendar and there's one day in the time frame she gave me that I can give her. And so I email her and I say, here's the day. Well, I didn't even realize it was Veterans Day, right? And she's obviously, I don't even know if she's considered a government employee. I have no idea what this contracted agency is considered, right? All I know is my husband's a school teacher and he worked on Veterans Day, right? But either way, I tell her Veterans Day. Don't even realize it's Veterans Day. And I also said to her in the email back to her, I said, hey, keep in mind, I hadn't heard from anybody for 3 months. And you reached out to me and gave me a very short window of time. So I apologize that I don't have a lot of options for you, but it is what it is, right? So, I get a response back from her that, okay, we're, good to go for that day. Doesn't say anything about it being Veterans Day. So she comes to our home and we start doing this assessment, and you'll hear in the audio, or if you watch the video, you'll hear how quickly it went downhill very quickly. And, so it was just a really, really frustrating experience, to say the least. And, as you watch and hear this video, you're going to hear me get a little choked up in a couple spots of the video. And it was interesting because when she was here, I stayed cool, calm, and collected, okay? Even in the midst of how, I don't want to say adversarial it got, but just the tension, right? The tension. I stayed cool, calm, collected. But as I was recording this when she left, that's when my emotions kind of came out more. And the part that you're going to notice that I get pretty emotional about is when I start sharing on this video that I've been caregiving for 25 years. 25 years I've been caregiving. That's when Courtney was born. 25 years ago is when I began to caregive for my dad. I mean, it very much predated 25 years, but for 25 years, he has never attended a doctor appointment alone. Yeah, true caregiving began 25 years ago with him. And it just overwhelmed me saying that, because I think what really upset me the most about this interaction with this woman was how disrespectful she was, how she fought me on collaboration. And I just realized there's no room for that. Caregivers don't deserve that. The arrogance that there has to be to resist, to reject collaboration is mind-boggling to me. And so, yes, it provoked a lot of emotion. And you'll hear me say a lot in the video and the audio that when I advocate for my kids or for my dad, I'm not just advocating for them. I'm advocating for other people. I'm advocating for people out there that I know don't have the capacity, don't have the skill set to do so. And so even this advocacy in this moment with this woman, because I ended up typing a very thoughtful, lengthy email to her supervisors after this interaction. And, that advocacy isn't just to say, hey, I'm not working with her. You got to assign us to someone else. But that advocacy is, you need to know what took place, because there are parents, there are caregivers who this will happen to them and they're not going to tell you. They're not going to advocate. They're going to be afraid of retaliation, or they just don't have time to sit and write the email. They just don't have the capacity, or they don't know the rules, the laws, all of this like I do, to know that what just transpired was even wrong, right? So it just got emotional because I was just this is the last thing caregivers need. There is so much that's out of our control. And, I'll joke a lot and say this is why special needs parents are control freaks, right? Because we've lost control of so much of our lives. And although I'll joke about that, I'll self-admit that I am that. The truth is, there's a lot of psychology behind that we have lost control of so much of our lives, right? And this just is not what people need. This system is already so hard. It's so hard to navigate. It's so hard to figure out. And I'll admit, like, I've done a really good job doing that. One of my strengths is that I have really strong critical thinking skills. Like, that is how I'm wired. I'm a problem solver. I can figure out how to work through an issue. I can figure out who I need to email, who I need to reach out to, all those things, right? And even for me, the system is still very challenging. And so sure, a lot of times I do stop and go, how does a family like this figure this out? How does a single mom figure this out? I think back to 25 years ago when I was an 18-year-old teen mom who now had a baby with a disability. And I was living on welfare and I was alone, just the two of us. How did I figure those things out? And so, you know, I really do keep parents like that in mind and people that I just know need help and need assistance. I talk to families all the time. People reach out to me all the time. People refer people to me all the time. Can you help this mom? Can you talk her through this? Can you talk her through that? Can you get her on Medicaid Waiver? Can you help her through this issue with her school district? Things like that. I see it all the time. We need help. We don't know how to fix some of these issues. And so when the people that are hired, that this is their job, this is what they're getting paid to do, fail us by either being jerky or being, non-collaborative, being defensive, gaslighting. I mean, there was so much happening in this incident. That's where it brought and provoked so much emotion in me because I just was like, this is not what we need. This is not what we deserve. And I really stopped too and just thought, because even one of my girlfriends called me after she saw it, but pretty quickly. And, we just sat on the phone and our kids are very different, but the story's still the same, that it's such a broken system. And it's the kids who suffer when they don't have the support and the advocacy that is needed. And that's where your hope is that these people who are hired and paid to do this, they're coming alongside the caregiver. And so whether that caregiver is a strong advocate, a parent who doesn't know anything about the system, no matter what level you're on and you're at as a parent, the hope is this case manager is some consistency and somebody who could come in and meet that caregiver where they're at and support them where they're at and make sure this person is getting what they need. So anyways, yeah, me and my girlfriend, we just really talked through like just the brokenness, how broken it is and how the system just can beat you down as a caregiver, where truly it should be building you up. Because the truth is, I'll give you an example. This is the program that provides Kevin his nursing when he's authorized 112 hours a week of nursing. We have 30 of those hours filled. This program, the state, because technically like Kevin's a ward of the state because when he turned 18, he needed a guardian. I'm his guardian, but he's a ward of the state. I mean, legally speaking, that is what he is. He's not a minor. I'm not responsible for him, right? I am now as his guardian, but he is a ward of the state. The state is relying on programs to help ensure the safety and welfare of this ward of the state, right? Of Kevin. I know that sounds terrible, but please hear me out that I don't look at him that way. I'm just trying to help make legal sense of this to the listener. But they need us. They need these caregivers. The whole point of these waiver programs is to keep people in the community and in the home or in a home-based community setting so that they're not institutionalized. Because the state understands that not only should these people with disabilities have legal rights to be living in the community and living not institutionalized, but it's cheaper for them to be on a Medicaid waiver program that provides the nursing, provides the home modifications, provides the adapted vehicles, all the different things that you need. It's still cheaper than them being institutionalized and the state paying for that. So that's what's weird in this is wait, you need me to provide this care, this voluntary care to him because he only has 30 hours out of 112 hours a week of nursing filled. but then yet your representative is going to come into my home and basically be adversarial, non-collaborative, and jerky to me, right? This is really intended to be a partnership. It's really intended that you should be working together. So that's really where a lot of the emotion came along with this. And I just realized it just shouldn't be that way. And I know there's people who won't speak up. I know there's parents who, again, are very afraid of retaliation. And I'll be honest, retaliation is very real. We've experienced it in many different settings. It's very real and it does happen. And so I get it, but I just felt compelled. And it's funny because when she left my house, like right away, I was like, I have to make a video. And it's funny to me because that just shows me that I'm doing what I should be doing, that's how my heart, my mind is wired. Like I have to make a video about this. I have to share about this. And this isn't just to complain. This is to create awareness. This is to help people understand the caregiver experience. This is also for the caregiver to listen to and go, oh my gosh, yes, I experienced this. And even again, just putting this on Facebook, making a couple reels from the video I made, I was already getting that crazy high engagement where, caregivers were commenting and just saying like, yes, this is so broken and it's so hard. And thank you for advocating and all of that. So this isn't just to complain and do nothing, because also the next day I sat and I typed, like I said, a lengthy email to the supervisor. I have no idea internally how they're handling this situation and this woman, but they obviously know she needs some more education and she needs to be disciplined because like you'll hear in the video, I mean, there was a lot of gaslighting, just unprofessionalism, things like that. She brought up the fact that it was Veterans Day. She shouldn't even have been there. All these things. I mean, it was crazy. And also I would add, keep in mind for a lot of these appointments like this is in my home. This isn't just sitting in an office somewhere. This is in my home. This literally took place at my dining room table in my dining room. And so these situations are also extra awkward when you're having an adversarial situation and it's right there in your house, right? It's a little tricky to say the least. But another interesting part that I wanted to share with you guys was as I put a couple reels up on Facebook, someone that I would say I considered a friend, and I'm going to say quote unquote friend, commented, and I was kind of watching the comments closely because I like to respond to people pretty quickly, keep the engagement going. And so I'm so thankful that I saw right away when this woman commented. But to put it in perspective, I would say if I ran into this lady in a Target, I would go up to her and I would have been like, hey, so good to see you. And I'd hug her, right? So I was a little surprised when she put 2 comments on my Facebook post that were just nasty, absolutely nasty. And she basically said, all you do is complain. Everybody knows you get whatever you want for your kids. She talked about our house. Some of you that know us may know, but we had a builder here in Cleveland that built us our house at cost. I don't know if she thought we got it for free, but it was at cost. So yes, it was discounted, but it definitely wasn't anything close to free. But she mentioned that. I think she said something like about me whining or whatever. I don't know, but I wish I kind of hid it quickly, the comments. And then all of a sudden there was a third comment and I had to block her. But between the first 2 comments and the third comment, I actually messaged her on Facebook and was like, wow, where is this coming from? And hey, I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but please stop putting stuff on my Facebook page. And I also just said, this is hard for all of us because this is a special needs mom, right? This is not just some random person. This is someone who has a kid with a disability. And so it really caught me off guard. But then when I had to block her because of her third comment, she doesn't get my message. Then she can't respond to my message. So I'm still kind of weighing if I should just text her or reach out to her. But her third comment really opened my eyes to what I was dealing with. And that comment was, your daughter even got an air-conditioned school bus. My kid with CP had to sit on a hot school bus. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. not out of anger, not out of frustration, but I was just like, whoa, she is going way back, way, way, way back. I mean, I'm talking Courtney was single digits age when we started getting an air conditioned school bus for her. And so I'm like, there's some deep hurts here, right? And really, it just, I really actually sympathized with this woman. Again, I have zero bitterness toward her because that comment alone just showed me there is something deep going on. There's something I was able to do for my kids that she wasn't able to do for her child, or whatever. I don't know. And you guys have heard me, like, we did that podcast, my friend Brad and I, about chronic sorrow. I just spoke about chronic sorrow 2 months ago at our church network, sharing about that with pastors and leaders. And so I knew right away, I was like, this is chronic sorrow. My post triggered something in her that is undealt with. And so as much as, yeah, she's blasting me, she's taking it out on me, I knew this really wasn't about me. This wasn't about Courtney. This was something much, much deeper. And I will say, though, I'm not going to lie and say like, oh, it didn't bother me in the least. I think the thing that was hard for me was nothing really has been handed to me. I know sometimes I make things probably look really easy, especially on social media. I don't post about the struggle a lot. I have invited people into our journey of a lot of Courtney's medical care, a lot of the challenges we faced with that. I invited people into the 7 weeks leading up to her death. I've invited people into our journey adopting Kevin, all of that. Like I don't put just the good things, right? I've put the hard things out there, but maybe I just make it look easy. Maybe because we go to Disney World a lot, it looks easy. I don't know. All I could do is speculate, but I know that every single thing my kids and my dad have are because I've worked really hard for them. And I've worked through this crazy broken system for them. My kids especially, I feel like I have woken up every day for the last 25 years to care for them. I live and breathe them, right? Like that is the caregiver mentality. That is the caregiver way of life. And so, I shared this on Facebook, this experience with this mom and what she wrote, because I was actually getting ready to have a phone meeting with a leader in the Ohio Department of Medicaid about some challenges we're having for Kevin with his day programming and this Ohio home care waiver he's on. And the way I got this meeting was through a political connection I have. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to actually get through in a timely manner to the Ohio Department of Medicaid and to someone in leadership. And so anyways, I was on a plane coming home from Orlando, and I just, started writing out all my notes, all my bullet points of what I needed to talk to, even coming up with solutions, all of that to have on this phone call with this woman. And then when I got home the next day, I typed them all up, printed them out, had them all ready, and I snapped a picture of me with these 2 sheets of paper with 50 different bullet points, right? And I posted and said on my story, I said something like, hey, I'm having this meeting today, 1 p.m. with a leader in Medicaid, thanks to a political connection. Please pray for this. And then I did a post on Facebook that shared about this experience of this woman kind of blasting me on Facebook. But then I just shared about advocacy and how much work it is and how much time and effort goes into it. And then I went on to share about having this opportunity coming up that day to have this conversation with someone from the Ohio Department of Medicaid. And I shared, and I'm going to share with you guys now, like, let's start with the political connection, because I'll even say someone commented and said, I really want political connections and I can't get them. And I'm not saying that was anything wrong to say, or it's not at all. But like my response to that lady was, yeah, I've worked really hard to get those political connections. Like many of those have stemmed from me just showing up at political events in my community, me doing door knocking during campaigns, me working the polls, different doors that just God's opened, but then just we keep showing up. We serve, we network, right? And relationships just by default get built. And so, I wanted to make it clear, like, someone didn't just call me and be like, hey, do you want to have a political connection? Like, no, that is something I worked for. That is something I have spent money, I've spent time on, I have put myself out there to build those connections. And so I was sharing on Facebook about, having this political connection, being able to have this meeting today. In my post about, these 2 pieces of paper I had with all these bullet points, like I said, I have prayed over this meeting. I have done the research. I've taken the time to write all of this out. I've come up with solutions. I've come up with suggestions. I've reread the Ohio administrative codes. I mean, I could practically recite the Ohio administrative codes for this Ohio home care waiver that Kevin's on. And so I'm just sharing the process. Like, none of this is easy. None of this, none of the advocacy is easy. It all takes time. And that's what I really stressed in that post was like, caregivers are tirelessly doing this. They're advocating and advocating and advocating over and over and over again. And they're doing the work to figure this out. They're doing the work to gain the knowledge. They're not giving up. They can't, because their loved one truly depends on this. So again, I guess going back to the lady who blasted me on Facebook, like there's no bitterness there. I forgive her for that. I know it's her own issue, but there was a piece of me that just had to stop and go, none of this has been handed to me, and none of this has been handed to most parents who have seen positive outcomes for their kids. They have worked tirelessly to make this happen. And the truth of it is too, is that my faith is the piece that makes this all just kind of a non-negotiable. Like, I have to do this. I have to advocate. I have to speak up, even when it's hard, even when it becomes adversarial, even when someone misunderstands me or someone thinks I'm a jerky mom, right? Like, I know this is who God has entrusted to me. I know this is who God has handpicked for me to care for, and vice versa. God has handpicked them for me and me for them, right? And, for so many years, for the longest time, I lived with the tension of wanting to be a caregiver who was liked. I wanted to be the family in the hospital that, the nurses walked in our room and thought we were the greatest thing since sliced bread. I wanted to be the family that was easy to get along with and everyone thought the world of, to the point that it probably became an idol in my life. But then when Courtney's care changed and she was living on IV nutrition, and it just required so much more advocacy because she had a central line, and it's kind of hard to explain without boring you with the details, but regardless, there was a lot more advocacy because of how intense her level of care was. And I got to a point where I just realized, and God really convicted me, you have to answer to me someday. You do not have to answer to man. And if you don't speak up, are you going to be able to live with yourself if something happens to her? And it just showed me, like, this could be life and death for her. Medical errors are the second leading cause of death in our country. And that's death. That's not even just harm. I mean, harm, I don't even know what that statistic is, but truly, like, God really showed me, like, this could be life and death for her. And you're going to have to answer to me. You're going to have to be able to live with yourself. And my whole perspective shifted. And there was also a moment when a pastor gave me a devotional. And I actually did a podcast about this called The Sin of Silence. And there was a devotional in this book that talked about when silence is sinful. Because sometimes I think as Christians, we believe the lie that if we're not making waves, if there's no confrontation, that we're being good Christians and that we're representing Christ better. And nothing can be further from the truth. And that's my biggest word of encouragement always to Christian caregivers is just because there's an absence of conflict or everyone likes you, that does not mean that you are acting in obedience to God. It doesn't. It could be the exact opposite. It could be that you are not speaking up for your kid. You're tolerating sin. You're tolerating laziness. You're tolerating medical errors. Who knows? Whatever it is, right? The absence of conflict or challenging hard conversations, any of that, or just the absence of advocacy, that is not indicative of, hey, I'm following Jesus well, right? It's not. And so that is something I learned from that devotional was just, it can be sinful to not speak up. And our job as Christians is to just based on scripture, is to let our appropriateness be evident to all. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, years ago, I used to serve on the Family Advisory Council at our children's hospital here in Cleveland. And I would speak to all the new resident doctors. I would speak to all the new nurses during their orientations. And I would hear stories of them telling us families are whipping shoes at them, cussing them out, doing all these horrible things. That's what I'm talking about. Is there's a difference between, hey, I'm going to throw a shoe at a nurse because they're coming in to get vitals at 2 a.m. and I'm going to firmly say no to something I don't want for my kid, or I'm going to firmly advocate for my kid. There's a huge difference. And so our job as believers is to let our appropriateness be evident. We don't want to lose our cool. We don't want to cuss people out. We don't want to throw things at them. Are we going to fail? Yes, we will fail. I have failed. But pick ourselves back up, tell Jesus we're sorry, tell that person we're sorry, and you do better the next time, right? By God's grace. But the truth is, are you going to be misunderstood at times? Yes. But your job is to do things with dignity, with respect, with integrity, and then leave the consequences up to God. And if that means that someone thinks you're a jerky mom because you spoke up for your child, here's what I would tell you is I've had to just get to the point of going, they're never going to understand. They're never going to understand. Most of these people who are caring for your kid have never slept a night in the hospital. They've never almost watched their kid die. They've never gotten a life-threatening diagnosis or a ongoing lifelong diagnosis for their child. Like you have to keep everything in context that there's going to be people who simply misunderstand you because they just don't have the same life experience as you. And so there's only so much you can do to make people understand you. And I believe for us as Christians, the call is just to be obedient to what God's telling us to do. And then you leave it up to God, the rest of it, right? We are not responsible for how people respond to us. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we receive that, believe that, we live in so much more freedom as caregivers. And we have to trust that we are living for God. We're living for Christ. We're honoring our kids. Our worship is caring for our kids. And so that can't be based on what someone thinks of us, right? And so that's the part that, I've had to come to terms with is that people aren't always going to understand you. People aren't going to understand the advocacy you have, and that is okay. And we do need to let go of that. We are living for one being, and that is God. And this is who God has entrusted to our care. And also the thing I would say is we have to really remember that every single thing is spiritual. So often we under-spiritualize things. We're really, I think for the caregiver, the long-term caregiver, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing our kids a disservice or a loved one a disservice when we don't spiritualize everything. The second we lose sight of the fact that changing your adult child's diaper is worship and is honoring to God, you're going to be burnt out so quickly, right? When that's your life for the rest of your life. Feeding your child, sleepless nights, you name it, right? The hospitalizations, all of the different things, the financial struggles, right? The marital struggles, whatever it might be. When you realize and start to allow yourself to see everything as spiritual, and that we can view all of these things, all of these hardships, all of these trials, the disability, all of it as worship, as part of God's plan, then it has meaning. It has eternal significance, right? And I think Satan wants nothing more for us to forget that these things can be worship, that simply just loving your child well is worship to God. Laying down your life for them daily in your caregiving, that is worship to God. So I think that's just really important to remember. And again, I'll say it one more time. I think the sooner we allow ourselves to remember that and remind ourselves that, we gain this freedom and this joy that nobody can take from us, that Satan can't snatch away from us, right? We know he is the author of lies. We know that he wants to steal, kill, and destroy. He would love nothing more than for us to forget and lose sight of the eternal significance of what we're doing on a daily basis. And Jesus is so clear about that in Matthew 25. He's so clear about that when he says, whatever you do to the least of these, that was me. You did it for me. And so guys, my challenge, my encouragement to you is don't lose sight of that. Don't lose sight of the fact that this is all for Jesus. Don't lose sight of that when, like this situation you're going to hear that I'm going to play for you in a minute. Don't lose sight of the fact that when you're acting appropriate, but you're advocating for your child and someone gets angry for it and, kind of huffs and puffs and storms out of the house. Sorry, that's worship to God. That's worship to God that I stood my ground for my kid. I knew what was fair. I knew I was being told lies. This person was trying to gaslight me. I knew there was a lot of bad, corrupt things happening in that moment, and I didn't give in to that. And anytime we're standing for truth, that is honoring to God. And we just can't forget that. And again, there's going to be people who misunderstand it, like that woman who kind of attacked me on Facebook, whether it's her own issues, whether it's just her seeing a lot of things work out well for my kids. Yeah, there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and brokenness behind all of that advocacy, right? But like for me as a Christian, I knew I can't give up. I can't give up. I have to do this for my kids. And so maybe at the end of the day, maybe she doesn't realize it, but there was a whole heck of a lot of determination, obedience, faithfulness, running that race with perseverance that God's called me to run. And maybe I've just been blessed with some really positive outcomes for my kids, right? I've also buried one of my kids too, though, so I never want to make it seem like nothing hard has come in our lives. Like we've had a lot of really, really, really hard things, so you're going to see that adversity. You're going to come across these challenging things. We're dealing with a lot of brokenness. The Bible is very clear that our battle is not against flesh and blood. And so, that's why I'm like, I'm not bitter towards this mom. I'm not even bitter towards this case manager. Does she need some discipline? Does she need some education? 100%. Because no family should have to deal with that. And praise God, it was me and not, a family who just came home from the hospital 3 months ago and is a brand new special needs parent. But I know my battle there is against darkness, it's a spiritual power. It's Satan who wants to destroy the nuclear family. It's Satan who wants to beat down the caregiver. It's Satan who wants you to feel worthless, feel like you can't do this, to feel overwhelmed. Those are his tactics. So I know for me, I've learned this is what God has called me to do, is to advocate for people who cannot advocate for themselves. And so we have to come to expect these things too. That's what I would say a lot. Although it's so disheartening when you're in that moment and you're being disrespected as a caregiver, you're not being supported, you're not being encouraged. But truly, Jesus prepared us that the world is going to hate us. It hated him first. He was perfect. He was sinless. He loved people better than we could ever love people. And yet they killed him, right? And so, we have to be prepared for the fact that the more we're going after godly things and pursuing godly advocacy and having high standards for our loved ones, we're going to be attacked, right? We're going to be attacked because this world operates under darkness. People operate under darkness. There's that spiritual battle where Satan wants nothing more than to steal, kill, and destroy and harm our families. And so we got a lot of battles. We have a lot of battles. And so it's not necessarily here's how to fix it all. But I hope those are some good words of encouragement. And I hope as you hear the next part of what took place that day and the advocacy that happened, just, know my heart in it. Know that, it was frustrated. It was a lot to take in. It was definitely very awkward being in my home. But this is where we recognize the brokenness that we're up against. And it should spur us on to be even stronger advocates to speak up. Because if not us, then who, right? If not us, then who? And so these adversarial moments need to be what shows us we have to keep fighting for truth. We have to keep fighting for the dignity and worth of our loved ones, especially in a world that tells us that they're less than, they're not worthy, they're better off dead. This is the culture we're living in. And so we get to be light, we get to be truth, and we get to show the world those things. So I don't want to say enjoy the video and the audio I'm going to share, because it was, again, it's definitely not a joyful thing by any means, but I hope it's enlightening. I hope it shows the struggle. I hope it shows the caregiver experience to remind you that our goal is to live for Christ. And according to scripture, these are the talents that he's entrusted to our care. And so we need to operate with diligence, with excellence, with strength, with purpose, and to just know that we're going to experience trials as we do that. And we should not be surprised by that at all. God bless you guys, and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear feedback on this first part and the next part that's to come. I think there's a lot of content here, and I love getting to have these types of conversations. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on Disability and Faith, Invited In with Christine Boyle. Take care, guys. All right, disability parents and anyone watching, you have to tell me if you can relate to this. I'm going to share our experience we just had. So Kevin was getting his assessment for this year, annual assessment for the Medicaid Waiver program he's on. Now, keep in mind, in July, a new company got the contract to manage this waiver that he's on. And it's been an absolute mess. Like, typically the case managers are calling and checking in once a month. And I'll be honest, like, if they were to call me and I didn't respond to them, Kevin would get disenrolled. I had not heard from anybody for close to 4 months. Okay. And so it's really ironic that I finally hear from someone, and then there's this absolute push to quickly get this assessment done, right? Because they needed to have this assessment sent in to Medicaid on time. And so as a parent, I'm expected to bend over backwards to accommodate and make, in this really, quick, short span of time, I'm supposed to make this work, right? For them to come to my home to do this assessment. And basically I was like, well, here's the day I could do it, which just happens to be Veterans Day. I didn't even really think of that it's a federal holiday, right? And these are technically workers that probably have the day off. But I said, this is the only day I could do to meet to do this assessment. So anyways, this lady comes to do the assessment, and there's a part of the assessment that determines the person's nursing hours, how many hours they can get. And I have always, for many, many years, probably for the last 10 years, I have done this assessment, this annual assessment for Courtney, who, as you guys know, most of you know, has passed away. And then for Kevin, I have done it in the presence of a physician. In the last 2 years, I kind of let up a little, but I always do all of these assessments in person and with the case manager in person, because the history of this is a little over 10 years ago, the system became very corrupt. and they were booting kids off of this waiver left and right. I could name probably 5 friends of mine that have kids that got wrongfully taken off this waiver and put on a different waiver under the County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And they tried to take my daughter off of this waiver about 10 years ago, someone who was so medically fragile. It was ridiculous. And I knew at that time I would never do these assessments again over the phone or just leave them up to the case manager to do without me being present. And so again, we would do it with a physician at the physician's office. And anyways, and I wanted to participate in every part of it. And so this private duty nursing acuity scale is literally where they go through system by system, care by care, and it's a point system to determine how much nursing this child or this person is eligible for. And so today, this lady's in my home and we're getting toward the end. And I said, well, I would really like to do that nursing acuity scale together. And she refused. She said, nothing's going to change. His hours are not going to change. And my question very reasonably was, well, how do you know it's not going to change? How can you say that if you're not going to do that? Like, you can't say that. You don't know him. You didn't do his assessment last year. Are you telling me you're going to take his assessment from last year and copy the exact same thing? Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, then how can you say it's not going to change? And she said, well, this is a tool I use to be able to authorize his hours. And I said, well, this tool protects me and protects him so that I know how many hours he's eligible for. I said, what if you do this tool? Because right now he's eligible for 112 hours a week of nursing, the maximum amount, because Kevin has a lot of medical needs. And I said, what if you do it without me? And because you don't know him, this is your first time meeting him. And what if you get 84 hours a week of nursing and not those 112 hours? And this woman fought me on this. I mean, to the point where I was like, well, I can't sign this assessment and say that I participated fully and say that I agree with this if you're not allowing me to be present. And then she brought up the fact that it's Veterans Day and she drove an hour to be here and blah, 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 all these different things, right? And I wasn't giving in. It didn't make sense to me because, again, I've done this tool every year with every other case manager. And I know it takes it literally took us 2 minutes when she finally huffed and puffed enough and gave in because she could tell I was not giving in. And I said, I'll do it over the phone with you tomorrow. I don't care. I'll do a Zoom call with you. I'll scan this paper back to you tomorrow that says I agreed to this. And then she tried to back me into a corner basically and say, well, if you don't sign this, he's going to lose his eligibility. And I said, no, he's not. It's just that I'm not comfortable signing it today without doing this with you. And here's what I'll never understand. So this is the gist of it. I know she was frustrated to be here on Veterans Day, this federal holiday. And I'm sorry that you gave me literally a 4-day notice that you needed to do this assessment. And this was the only day I literally had nothing on my calendar and could be here and do this with you. I'm sorry that that's how it landed, right? I guess technically she could have said no one forced her to come here, but that's not really my problem, to be honest with you, right? But what I think I'll never understand is, I basically said to her, what does it hurt to do this? I know this takes 2 minutes to do. So what does this hurt? And again, other than the reasons that you want to leave my house and you don't want to be here and do this on your day off, I get it. Okay, that's fine. But other than that, what does it hurt to have the person who knows him best, the person who could give you the most accurate assessment, participate in that? And the attitude, the nastiness, the lack of professionalism, and now tomorrow I have to email her supervisor and go, yeah, that's not going to work. this relationship isn't going to work because I'm a caregiver. I've been caregiving for, sorry, Sam, I've been caregiving for 25 years. That is not what I need. That is not what comes into my home. That is not the type of personality I'm going to deal with. I'll tell you that right now. When you've been caregiving for 25 years, for the last 13, 2 kids with special needs, medically complex, nursing facility level of care, that is not what we need. We need support. And why would you ever resist collaboration? That is what I was trying to get at. Why would you ever resist collaboration from a parent, a caregiver, a guardian, somebody who cares, somebody who just says, I want my child accurately assessed? And no, you can't guarantee me that that assessment is going to be the same because you just met him 30 minutes ago. You don't know him from head to toe. You didn't ask me every single one of those questions. That is what I will never understand. And you see it in every area of disability. You see it in school settings when a family hires an attorney or has an advocate present. You're automatically the witchy mom or the, jerky dad who brings help, right? No, maybe that just means that the parent cares. Maybe that's what it means. Maybe they're not being adversarial. Maybe they just need support. Or like I said to the lady today, I said, sorry, I have a little PTSD from 10 years ago when this program tried to save my daughter, who was 100% TPN dependent with a central line, lived in intestinal failure, lived on IV nutrition, wasn't to skill level of care, even though ironically, an LPN can't even administer TPN, only a registered nurse, but she wasn't a skilled level of care. Do you know how hard I had to fight and how I had to go to state hearings to determine and fight for my daughter to be accurately assessed? So yeah, I do have a little PTSD. Yeah, I do want to do that assessment with you. Yeah, I do want to see you actually put those numbers in. Not because I think you're a bad person, but the reality is you do not know my kid. You have walked into my home for 20 minutes. You wouldn't even know how to fill that out accurately. Where is the humility? Where is the collaboration? Where is just the honor and dignity for caregivers? That's what I want to know. Why is that adversarial? Why was this lady huffing and puffing and almost basically storming out of my house? Literally, I'm not joking. She was shaking. She was so mad. And I don't get mad. I just kept kindly saying, I don't think you can guarantee me that that's going to be the same. You can't guarantee it. Because if you give him the wrong points for a certain part of his body or a certain part of his care, no, that's going to affect him. That's absolutely going. It's going to affect the support I get for him for the rest of the year. And she kept saying, well, you can appeal it. And I told her, I said, well, I request copies of his assessments. I request all of his records. I want to have that. That's my leverage. That's my protection as someone who relies on nursing and relies on this support. And so I guess the last thing I'll say is when you hear all this going on in our country about Medicaid, the people who need this, the people who qualify for these types of things, these services, are most vulnerable in this country. Please do not for a minute think that this is easy or that this is just handed to us. Nothing can be further from the truth. Kevin would be considered one of the most vulnerable people in our country. And these are the type of things we are dealing with as parents, as caregivers, as authorized representatives, as legal guardians. These are the attitudes. These are the things we're dealing with. And it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's not okay. And I'll be honest with you, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. And it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this hard. And I want you to stop, because if you know me and you're watching this, you may be going, whoo, she is feisty. Yeah, you're right, I am. And you know what I'll tell you? 25 years ago, I wasn't. And this is what the system will do. And I'm not saying it's bad. You have to be an advocate. You have to dig your heels in the ground. You have to just say what needs to be said. And I always do it with dignity. I always do it with respect. I'm not going to coddle you. I'm not going to pat you on the back and tell you I want to be a part of my kid's assessment. I'm going to say confidently, I have a right to be part of my kid's assessment. But what I'm going to say to you is this. What about the parents who can't do this? What about the young mom who has no clue how to do this? Why should her kid get less simply because maybe she hasn't walked through the things I've walked through? Maybe she doesn't have the skill set I have. Maybe she isn't as fearless as I am. Maybe she doesn't have the communication skills I have. Maybe she hasn't gone online and read the Ohio administrative codes to know what her rights are. Why would a kid ever suffer, or a person with a disability ever suffer because maybe their authorized representative or their guardian or their parent or their caregiver doesn't have the same skill set I do? Like, it shouldn't be based on who has the strongest advocate. But that is truly how the system is based on, right? It is. And you can talk to any disability parent and they will tell you that. It is based on how strong of an advocate you have to be. And I'll tell you what, that lady probably walked out of here and thought I'm the biggest witch with the bee. She probably did, even though, again, I treated her with complete dignity and respect, but I didn't back down. And that's the crappy part too, is when you're in the world of advocacy, when you're in the world of caregiving, you have to be okay being misunderstood. You have to be okay not being liked. You have to be okay with people walking away thinking you're the worst person in the world. But you're not. This is who God has entrusted to your care. This is the talent that He has entrusted to you. This is who He's entrusted to you to speak up when they can't speak for themselves. And again, to always do it with dignity and respect. Again, I'm not going to baby you. I'm not going to sit there and poo-poo you and, rub your back and sit there and put myself down to make you feel better. No, I'm going to confidently say what needs to be said. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And that's it. That's all I wanted to share. Friends, thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Again, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about all this advocacy, having to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Tell me your experience. Drop a comment. Message me. Head over to my website, christineboyle.com. You can connect with me there as well. But thanks again for listening to my explanation part of this podcast, and then also the actual event that took place in my home. I'll see you guys next time on Disability and Faith. Take care, guys.